Hi, I'm BoomerX, and this is MillennialZ, and
Hello.
this is our first podcast for father and son. And today's topic is personal responsibility, which I didn't choose. That was actually Millennial Z who chose that topic, which I thought was really interesting because everybody has their own idea what they think that is. However, it in my opinion, you really can't accomplish much without it. So
Yeah, very
actually,
true.
I'm trying to be kind when I say that, but and I'm called Boomer X because I was born on the cusp of the end of the Boomer generation and the beginning of Generation X. I'm actually 1966, so it's 2 years in to Generation X, but I was born in a Southern conservative area of the country, so everybody had boomer attitudes there. And you born in same, you know,
1994.
yeah, 2 years from, yeah, I remember. I was there. 2 years
Making
from
sure.
being a Gen Z, but at the end of the millennial. So, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
same thing, and born, even though you were born in a similar area, um, the time changed a whole lot during that time with the advance of information and electronics and technology bringing things forward. So a conservative South wasn't nearly as conservative or seemed so isolating Southern in your time as in mine. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, so the attitudes change much more quickly now than they did, or when you were born, and now especially than they did when I was born. When I was born, I mean, a cross country car trip took a very long time because there are very few interstates, except in the big cities. Um, but that's, of course, yielding different attitudes and different ideas and discussions and just mannerisms and everything else for that matter, to be honest with you. Um, it's been quite interesting, word choices. Um, but so personal responsibility, I guess the first thing to do would just be able to take what I took a long time trying to find out, you know, Webster's defines it, Oxford defines it, and all this stuff. But the Brookings Institution in 2009 came up with what seemed to be the most comprehensive and reasonable definition of personal responsibility to me. And I'm going to read it. And it has personal responsibility is the willingness to both accept the importance of standards that society establishes for individual behavior and to make strenuous personal efforts to live by those standards. Um,
it's an
it,
interesting definition.
yeah, it's like I said, it's most comprehensive. I found that, and I chose to go with that one because it was a good thing to discuss in and of itself. Like you said, I found that interesting. To me, it has no real uh, specific or defined definition, if you will. Like society determines what personal responsibility is, and I guess
Right.
it's yeah, which is to me odd as a boomer. Boomer X is society. The first thing for personal responsibility to me is you start looking inside yourself as to what personal responsibility is and don't let others dictate to you what that may be. You know what I mean?
I think they're kind of like grasping on the same sense of moral behaviors of society brings these standards to you, and then you define what your compass is. So that's the same standard of
Right,
a
right.
responsibility.
Yeah, and I thought that's what they're doing too. So we
Right.
comprehended it the same way. And it makes sense. I mean, you have to have some framework. So I'm assuming that they're listing that framework as society to at least get an idea of what personal is and what responsibility may be. And
Right.
society places that yoke on you and you're accepting it
I
personally.
Yeah, it's hard for me to swallow that concept because at the end of the day, there's a very defined concept of fault and what is your responsibility and what somebody else's faults are for their being their responsibilities in situations. Now, those can meld and be great at in certain situations, but for the most part, you're well aware that you had direct repercussions of things happening in this, in this order for these things to happen the way they did. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's
and you're
like
responsible for
society.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know how societies,
yeah. How they're going to define it, why it should matter, right?
right? I don't understand like
Yeah,
people growing up anywhere, they're not going to have different standards of what was my fault in an action, like
but actually they will. Much like say you get in a car accident. That's probably the easiest one. They have everybody, almost everybody, every state uses comparative negligence or comparative fault instead
mhm,
of it used to be, um, defined fault or specific fault. And I forget the term because it's been so long. This is decades ago when they did it, when I used to do investigations on collisions. That, if you made a left turn and you didn't yield right away and somebody hit you, it was all on you. You shouldn't have made that left turn. You saw that car coming. It was daytime. It was clear. It didn't matter if they were speeding. It didn't matter if
really,
their headlights were on. It didn't matter. You made a left turn in front of them, and they didn't have enough time to avoid it. You didn't yield right away, and you just took it, and they hit you. It's all on you. So, but nowadays, it's been, like I said, it's personal responsibility. Somebody who just maybe they were wool gathering and didn't notice it. Maybe they were. Uh, uh, they're going to say, well, I dropped my glasses, or as if that would matter because that's on you. You dropped them. They're your glass. You should make sure. But everybody nowadays, everybody's going to argue those points going down the road as they should at a reasonable speed. Did everything. They were visible. They might even have day lights on, and they did nothing wrong.
right?
But now the courts will say, well, you had some fault in it too. You were there. You could have stopped. You had a little extra time. They would put some of that responsibility on that driver as opposed to the one who made the illegal left turn, didn't yield right away, didn't have their glasses on, whatever they were doing. And, like I said, and it used to be that it was all just 100% fault. Now they don't do that. They look for everything and just try to assign it that way, which I find interesting to me. I mean, it's almost
Yeah,
like why have rules, on the
yeah,
road,
right. And
but
that's what I think that's what it probably derived from was this is a very black and white. Like you're taking a left turn, you hit somebody, that is what it is. There's no investigation needed. Like obviously you're
yeah,
in yielding
turn
form.
right in front of them. They had no time to
Yeah.
stop. It
But
was
I also understand the other way is like, okay, say, me and you ride motorcycles, we're going down a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit road and it's a bump or a hill and we can't really see what's going on the other side. But we decide to go 90 for whatever reason because we're feeling it.
right.
And some old lady's taking a left turn, has terrible reaction time, but she has her blinkers on, she's doing everything right. But she's got a big old boat wagon of a car that's probably made in the freaking 80s, also can't brake well. So she has a low reaction time, can't brake well, and we're speeding. Who's at
Right.
fault, really? It's like, really, we're the ones at fault because we're speeding double the speed limit, you
Well,
know?
and that's how those differences came up, and they try to parse out who's responsible for what and
Yeah,
who's. But the thing of it is, really, if it's an elderly lady, it's terrible, but it's on her to know she has bad reaction time. You know, really, I mean, she's the one drive. She gets in that car every day.
right.
That's me talking. I'm an older person now. That's
Yeah,
so. If I know I don't have the same reaction speed as I did when I was 16, and I don't, I'm not even close. I'm the one that has to be more aware. It's on me. And it sounds funny, like I'm bashing old ladies, but the thing of it is, it's really on her. It's like, yeah, we were speeding, and surely, most reasonable people would go, well, yeah, man, how can anybody see? But the thing of it is, you're supposed to be looking down the road and go, man, that guy's getting big fast. I might want to reevaluate. Like I said, I'm talking about how it used to be. I personally, I agree. If they're going double the speed limit, they take on some of the responsibility on their own. And
right,
even you're responsible for always driving defensively. That's what they say, to try to avoid an accident.
right.
But if you're going to look at, like, to me, personal responsibility the like one especially some retired SEAL guys, they take extreme ownership as one thing. They do. It starts with personal responsibility and ends with personal responsibility. That anything that happens to you is your responsibility to fix it. Or anything that you did that ends up bad, it's on you to make sure it doesn't. No excuses. It doesn't matter what happens if it's completely out of your control. You should have foreseen it. You should have fixed it. You should have seen it coming. You should have done something. It was your responsibility, extreme ownership of whatever your mission task was. And to be honest with you, some people love the idea of it and many people hate it. I, you know, but here's the thing. You, like I said earlier, really can't accomplish anything without personal responsibility. You will forever be floundering around, blaming everybody else for your circumstances. And here's the thing about it to me, and it doesn't matter who's to blame. It's still your responsibility to fix your position.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a lot of good and bad with that mentality of it starts with personal responsibility and ends with personal responsibility, because I can see the very goods of, no matter what, I don't dread on who's at fault here. It's just going to be me, and I'm going to fix it, and I'm not going to worry about all these other nonsense because they're not really going to help me in this situation. What's going to help me is me, because that's always what's going to help me in the end, is me doing something about it. But also at the same time, you're taking on a lot of unnecessary stress for a lot of situations, because some things genuinely are out of your control.
Yeah,
And if you think,
many things
oh, that
are.
was me and I could have done this, this, and this different, I'm like, so what are we doing here? You're just thinking of the ifs and buts about it, like who
Right.
cares? Like
And
it's not
and you have to do that to some degree, but at some point when you're going about the business of fixing it or trying to change your situation, like you said, it doesn't matter. It's time. It's your responsibility to get yourself out of the situation.
right,
It's not anybody else's, really. And if you think it is, if you're continually blaming everybody else for your situation or circumstances, be they good, bad, or ugly, that's what children do.
right,
You're not in control of yourself, your reactions, your thinking, your speech, your non-actions, nothing. You're just going about life and things happen to you. And that means you also can't take any credit for the successes because you just kind of bumbled into it doing whatever you wanted to do, but you're not
right,
responsible for it because everybody else showed you how to do it. And maybe they did it for you. And they're like, well, no, I studied hard. I did this. I made a good grade on that test. Or, I learned this particular skill because I studied and practiced and trained for hours. And it was, yep, that's, I agree. You did, but you can't take the good stuff and leave the bad stuff and say, I'm not responsible for that bad stuff if you didn't do what you were supposed to do and it turned out badly, or
right,
you did it wrong and you go, well, that person taught me wrong. Well, it's on you to learn the right way.
right.
Even if that person or you're
Cross
supposed to
reference at
check,
least.
do what?
Cross reference at least, if you have, don't take
Yeah,
everything for face value.
check around. When I taught, people constantly second guess me, wanted to try it, and I'd be like, that's fine with me, because I do the same thing. So I fully expect somebody to do it. You know how I am. I don't do it unless I've vetted it and it's worked or I've done it many, many times. And I'm like, all right, I know this is it, you know.
Hmm.
And it's on me. If I teach you wrong, I can, well, yeah, yeah, that's my bad, or I should say, you're the one that doesn't know. So if you're doing it wrong, part of that's my fault. That's how I look at it. But that to me is part of that ownership, that I have. And I know the funny thing is, boomers really started with that idea, after World War II. And they were some of the first ones to get rid of it during the hippie movement of the 60s when I was a kid. And into the 70s, like they're the ones who came up with excuses for everything and starting a lot of reasons why people can't get this done and that done because they've been treated poorly and all that. And they weren't wrong. And that's why I look at society thing. Like if society says you're not responsible for whatever it is. I don't know if you can necessarily believe that all the time. You have to take personal inventory, self inventory, and decide it's my responsibility to change this, no matter what your circumstance. That's what I think. But that's an extreme position in many people. But that's how you can turn your life around and become a different person. Because it's really your thoughts, actions, non-actions, speech, and everything else that allow you to change your spot. Nobody really, almost nobody else is going to do it. Those friends and family or those kind-hearted souls who help you, that's wonderful, but they don't have to, and it's not their responsibility to do it unless they have some sort of, government job or something. But
Right.
even then, they're overworked too. They need help. The biggest way you can help them is to do something for yourself so they don't have to worry about you.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, you're speaking about it, but I think this mentality is also limited to a certain extent of age because, you know, a 4-year-old, how much responsibility can a 4-year-old really have,
Right. Well, that's well, that's why I said about, if you're going to take no responsibility for your position, that's basically being a child. To me, if
Right.
it's clear, if you're a child, you can't be held responsible for your actions really, because you don't know what they're supposed to be like. You can't inventory your environment or anticipate how people are supposed to be. You have no real judgment skills or discernment at all. You're just kind of figuring it all out. So how can you be held
Well, that's, I
reasonably
think,
responsible for your actions or not? Now, of course, you can get punished, and in my day, I was spanked and whipped and and punished severely for making things. So I learned responsibility the old-fashioned way, which many people would be horrified by, but today anyway. But I didn't forget it, and I don't advocate it. I mean, you can see how often I spanked or you in your life. You seem to remember more often than me.
of
But
course.
yeah, but I can remember less than the fingers on one hand. 4 times I can remember that I actually, put my hands on you and spanked you.
Yeah, I can remember 2 times were pretty bad, but I remember distinctly why, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
So there's also that is it worked, I
Yeah,
remember
and I
distinctly
was
why.
loath to do it. I hated it. I didn't want to do it, which is why I would
Right.
yell a lot, because I'll be like, "Don't make me do." I'm getting mad because you can make me have to punish you, and I'd be mad at you for doing it. I'd be mad at me for having to do it because I didn't want to do it. So and and here's the other thing: being of our DNA stock, punishments don't work very well. Mentally, we can have nothing and be okay. Like, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. All right. My negative
Yeah.
reinforcement
There was
or
a lot of
punishment was
there was a
really
lot of
limited on what I could do.
showing you up that I don't yeah, showing you up that it didn't matter to me was
Right,
yeah, that was a lot of
right,
my mentality was like, okay, I'm not gonna show you that it matters to me,
right.
you know.
And I did it too, so I knew exactly what you were doing.
Yeah,
Um, which which just spirals, makes it worse. The
of
punishments
course,
and the reactions and everything.
of
But the
course.
thing, all that was to me just to make you respond, just to give you some idea that there are consequences for actions. I could not, it would not be responsible for me as a father to have you grow up and think, the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to be mean to me if I do something terrible, like hit my brother in the head with something. Nobody's really going to care when I'm an adult. That's not going to be the case. If I hit another adult, its repercussions are severe. And it's on me to teach you that, not just talk to you, but give you a real, mean people who don't know you, don't like you, and have weapons, and who can kill you if you don't do what they say, are going to show up if you do that. I was certainly the lesser of two evils, as far
Yeah,
as that.
for sure. Like, yeah, getting a spanking or having to go to prison because you didn't understand the
Right,
repercussions of your actions, like
right. Or if you refuse to
obviously.
go to prison, get shot.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
That's
or it escalates from there of,
right.
or you
And
get in the
that
wrong crowd because you don't understand the real consequences of getting into this situation.
Right. And that's kind of the thing. When I was growing up as a kid, if you ran for the cops, they shot at you. No questions asked. All of them. All of them. And now they're like, he's not armed. What are they shooting? And they've got, and they have laws now that say you can't shoot him unless he's an imminent danger to the public or yourself if he's fleeing. It's on you to catch him,
Yeah.
which actually I agree with. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when I was a kid, that wasn't the case. If you
Yeah.
didn't listen to them and you fought them and were beating them, they would shoot you dead. You couldn't,
Right.
there was no simple, fighting back and all this romantic stuff you see in the movies. That simply wasn't the case, and fleeing. They would shoot you right there if they thought you were going to get away. I prefer the much more humane approach now. But now you can't change your ID like you could then. And it's, so you don't have anywhere to run. Every technology is everywhere. Everybody, you can be identified, tracked down, so it's easier now than it was then. But still, it's interesting. And with the personal responsibility, it's not the same as accountability, even though they're related. You can't, you can hold somebody accountable and they just simply don't accept personal responsibility for their actions. I see that on the workplace all the time, like, well, I got to do this. I didn't do anything wrong. Well, if you're going to be held accountable for something, you have the responsibility to make sure that you do what you need to do, absent some extraordinary circumstances. And the old military stuff, when I was in the Army, they didn't accept any excuses. If you were tasked to do this, you made sure it was your job, responsibility to make sure it happened the way it was supposed to, period.
Right. Results is all that matters.
Yeah. You were accountable for this, then this happens. And they didn't care how it happened unless you violated the law when you were doing it,
Right.
But other than that, yeah.
To go back, and I wanted to touch on that's the line where I think is the big difference between your generation and my generation, and then onward, of course, it's getting even blurrier, is when that line starts of responsibility. Legally, it's 18, of self-responsibility, technically.
Most of it, but that gets to the legal quagmire of, hey, you can vote when you're 18, you can be drafted when you're 18. There's a lot, you can enter into a contract when you're 18, except student loans. Apparently they want somebody with money, just co-signing. Right. But you can't drink or buy tobacco till you're 21. I'm like, but they're going to charge you as an adult, but you're not adult enough to drink or buy tobacco.
Yeah, you get charged. To me,
that's straight up unconstitutional, but that's another argument, So
well,
you have most responsibilities at 18.
Right.
But you definitely have all of them at 21.
Right? Yeah. I'm giving into like 18. I'm legally, you can be charged, as an adult. Although you have your exceptions of 14-year-olds getting charged as an adult because
if it's a violent or
they killed both their parents and show no remorse, or like, okay, you're crazy, you need to go to prison. You're obviously, you need it.
If it's a particularly egregious crime, then they'll charge you as an adult because they want you to have adult penalties for it. But yeah,
I'm talking like socially, the line is being blurred drastically. Like, people have lower expectations for others and themselves at even an older age now. Like, they consider what I would assume an 18-year-old to be competent in around when you were growing up as an 18-year-old. To me now, although I have little reference, it's like that's like a 22-year-old, because most people are going to college now, and they've made college different as well. I know they've made college different from when you were growing up, because they have these programs now where people are essentially in high school for another 4 years. I'm seeing these people getting out of college at 22, and they act no different than high schoolers, seniors, because they've essentially been living that life for another 4 years. They didn't really have a different perspective on how to do things. They are even treated the same. I remember going in. Yeah, I remember going in and doing just tech school. I remember them treating us and like going through the motion of filling out your form like we're children, like we're
right. Yeah, you should know how to fill out a form by the time you're going to a tertiary school, a higher.
Right. They had the
tech or technical school or a college or university. If you can't fill out a form, what are you doing there? And I'm not saying being hostile, but at some point you have to say there should be a minimum level of competence Like
Yeah.
that's a responsibility. Look, it's your responsibility to at least be able to evaluate a form and fill it out, or you can't be taught.
Right. And it goes into when I was there, they had an issue with my attendance because I wouldn't show up every day because I they would talk about things. I was taking the prereqs and I already did that in high school. So I'm like, I'm just gonna show up every once in a while and make sure we're all on the same track. I know what they're talking about. I'll be there for the test. I have my papers showing what dates the tests are. I'll do
Right.
whatever assignments they have is already in the paper. I'll just show up for certain days, make sure everything I'm on track. I make sure everybody knows I'm here, and I'm participating. I had a math teacher who she was like, attendance is very necessary. It's part of your grade because she wants you there.
And it might as well be because the school's gonna approach you with it. And it switched the year I started university in 1984. They switched over and said before then that year, um, before then you could come to class or not, and it was
Right.
on you. You failed, it was on you. They didn't want to hear excuses.
And that's how
They
it should
treated you
be.
like
It's like,
adults.
exactly. It's like you can't, you show. If you don't, it's
If you
on
miss
you.
X amount of days, you better have a medical note or you're going to get an incomplete. They wouldn't quite fail you. They were easing it in,
Uh-huh.
and if you don't have a note after the incomplete or give some, real story, then it's going to turn into an F, you know, but
Hmm.
yeah, now it's regimented, but that's the thing. They're making it. And I've noticed it ever since then, less and less responsibility on the individual and more on society as a whole. So like it's almost like you're guaranteeing that you have fewer competent individuals who can move through life,
Yeah.
on their own. Like if somebody's not having their hand held, they get like stressed out. They start to wonder
Oh
what's
yeah.
wrong. And I'm like, how is that if you're a grown person? How can you expect to be a success? And even people who graduate from university, find a good job, have a good social network when they get in the job. And I've seen this as a supervisor, manager, and upper level management. They really they want to be spoon fed everything. And I remember my first job with a corporation. I sat there the first day like, what do they want me to do? They gave me nothing. I sat at an empty desk and a phone and a computer, and the computers were, nothing compared to now. And just trying to and just going through emails and looking. They gave me no HR book. It was nothing, and I basically had to make sure that I could contribute the best way I could figure out how, and talk to people, and it was all on me. And I found out later that wasn't unusual. My particular case was not unusual, and the corporation begged me to work for them. It wasn't like it was like they asked for me,
Right.
specifically. So now they have like a week orientation with videos and presentations and screens and people coming to check on you. They give you a list and like, and that makes it nicer, I have to admit. But at some point, how can you get any work done? You
Well, you're
know?
so micromanaged, and so now you spend 2 weeks being trained on something. It's common sense. Why am I having to take 2 weeks safety course since I was 18? I'm
Yeah, and you're gonna have to watch
27.
the language because we can't. Remember, we gotta.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
YouTube doesn't allow that. Yeah, so we can't say a lot of stuff. Yeah, definitely no curse words like that. But in certain buzzwords too. That
Yeah.
begins with an S and ends with an X and begins with an R and ends with an E and has a P in the middle. Or any of those violent, or risque
Right.
things.
Right.
So, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And I'm gonna
yeah.
forget to, trust me. But we just gotta.
So, well, without the cursing is they coddle you extremely, even on simple tasks that people, whoever's getting this job should know how to do these things already. If you have a driver's license, why are you teaching me how to drive a car again? You know what I mean? Like, it's on me. I got a driver's license already. Obviously, I went through the course. Obviously, I should know how
Yeah,
to drive.
if somebody's like, okay, we just need to copy your driver's license so you have a minimum qualification, you can drive a car. But that every corporation, because they get an insurance, they get an insurance benefit if they say we took them through driver safety, so they should be more safe than the average person. So that's that's why they do that. But I can see to your thing, it's eliminating more personal responsibility. They're assuming more responsibility on themselves, you know. And at some level, sure, everybody's responsible for somebody else to some degree. You know, if somebody falls over, you're going, hey man, you okay? You know, but as a general rule, but clearly there's something wrong. That's not a typical behavior. So you're as a caring person, you're going to make sure they're okay. And you should be a little responsible instead of just casually indifferent, like that's on him. But you know, there's at some point you have to draw the line, or nothing functions well at all. You know, but yeah, the difference with us, and you touched on it before I did, is I see far less personal responsibility for people of your age. You had the either fortune or misfortune to grow up with me. So so that responsibility thing was ingrained in you often, you know, and you could see it in myself. And even though your mother and I aren't married anymore, she was a very responsible person too, you know, is to follow through. We both understood it it wasn't going to happen unless, except through our decisions and making it happen for follow-ups and things like that. And even if something messed up and we would be bothered by it, it was on us to fix it and nobody else, you know.
Right.
But in general, I see your generation, that is not the case at all. They're always looking for somebody else to tell them what to do or make up for their shortcomings. And I'm like, how is that? Why do you expect other people to make up for your shortcomings? Whether it's your fault or not, it's on you to make up for your shortcomings. You know, that's me. That's BoomerX talking, right?
Well,
Um,
there's a lot of fine line. I think that it's the parabola situation again, is the extremes of one way that you have your people who, boomers were known for working, 7 days a week, never seeing their, well, especially men, never seeing their families, but they provided for them the whole time. But they literally spent 70 hours a week or more
yeah,
working
I
for
did that
40
for a
years.
while. Yeah, I did that
Yeah.
for a while.
Or
Yeah,
like Pawpaw, who just worked all the time from dusk to dawn, or
right,
dawn to dusk every day for 40 years, 50 years. And then, you know, we see that growing up, or I see that growing up, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to, just essentially give my life away to a job. So
right.
we go
And
the
me
other
either.
extreme.
I saw the
Right.
same thing. That was my fault, but I knew I had to provide for my family, you know,
Hmm.
and that was the only way I could do it. I mean, I many times I'd work 72 hours straight, or I'd work 15, 18 hours a day, get home, sleep, get up and leave again and never see y'all. I mean, you
Right.
probably remember that when you were a kid. But then I realized that this is stupid and I stopped doing it so much. But there are other times when it's required, you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
Um, but then, you know, that's why I wanted ultimately to get an office job to where I didn't have to do that, and I could see y'all and spend time with you, because I wasn't going to be that absentee father, and I wasn't going to devote myself to a faceless entity that doesn't care about me. You
Right.
know? And but that said, it was on me to make that change. It wasn't somebody up to somebody else. You know, it was my responsibility to make sure that I could find something appropriate and make that change, not for somebody else to bail me out of my predicament that, look, I'm working 12, 15 hours a day. I'm leaving at 3:30 in the morning and I'm not coming back till 8 at night, you know, because I'm doing that every day, you know, and I'm making myself take weekends off because I'm burning out and I'm not seeing my family. But, you know, it was on me to make that change and to make that not happen anymore.
Hmm.
Not to say they need to pass a law to make sure nobody can do this to somebody else. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree on that end. But what I was getting at it was like the extremes of seeing that extreme, and not to say that's what was happening in our household, but I know a lot of people witnessed that growing up, especially your generation did with y'all's parents, and then hippies happened and everything, because that was essentially the hippie generation was like, let's not do this, man,
Right.
and
They
that
say
was the
that.
extreme.
Right. Right. The early boomers said that. That's why they had hippies. You know, they're like, I'm not going to kill myself like my parents did for World War II and busting their hump in the corporation in the
Right.
late 40s and 50s, and I'm not working for the man. And then they grew up and became the man. Like I'm in between, and I see those guys. Those are all those guys that were at Woodstock. They're in charge of those places, and they didn't want to do it, but they're sure making everybody else do it when I came up.
Right.
But they're trying to shake off the shackles of being married to that before, so they can't do it overnight, or they don't have any interest to do it because it would hurt their bottom line. But yeah, but I think some good things came about by saying, look, it's on you to show me what to do. You hired me, but then there is some level of competence you should have. If you're a university graduate and you have to have somebody tell you how to read a form and sign it and date it, there's a problem, because those forms are extremely simple. Nobody makes a complicated form,
Right.
except perhaps the Department of Revenue. But it's extreme. There's a problem. Now, not to say the wording might be weird and you might have a question. That's a different thing. But if you have to have somebody over your shoulder telling you what to write on your own form for your information, and a standard HR form, they're written for people at 10th grade level, 8th grade level now, I think. Then that's like I said, it's your responsibility to find out. Ask what to do. What do you want me to do if you don't know?
Right. And that's what brought me into is like, growing up in high school, them teaching you through middle school, high school, all of that, them telling you like, take these tests to prepare you for life, and you're taking these tests, but that it never comes. Because they're like, oh, college is going to be this way, or college is going to be hard, so you got to do these things to make sure you're college prepped. And then,
well,
and then
honestly, that depends on what your major is, what you go
right,
into, because you can definitely. We've both seen it. You can float your way through college, get a degree, and
yeah,
not learn much of anything.
right.
Except
Well,
how
you
to
go,
drink.
you go. My brother, your other son's path of mechanical engineering, which was very demanding. It was a very, a very arduous path of college, and
Right.
I agree that is a college prep necessary career path. But for most part, especially now, they coddle you to even in college. They give you homework to so you'll study, and they keep you accountable for that homework. Like they put a grade on it to make sure you did your homework.
Yeah.
Like back in middle school shit.
Yeah,
Like
for university,
oh,
that's amazes me. And I remember when he first told me about that too, when he was studying. Also, the orientation where you go down there with the kids and they talk to you for a couple of days before classes even begin. Like all universities had orientation, but that was for the students to be oriented to the school and where to go and what to see,
right.
who's who. But the parents went with them, and it was a long draw. And I'm like, wow, and not that it's bad. It was just like less responsibility on the student, and the information they gave them was a lot more. Really, especially handouts, and with now the internet, even then the internet, you could go and check it out. It wasn't like, man, our orientation for me was 2 hours in an auditorium. Welcome. They told us who's who, and we filed out, and it was on us to find out what we needed to find out. It was all there. That was orientation.
That
Not
was
2
not
days.
mine.
Not with your parents there. Not.
That mine was the tech school. They wanted to do the walk around, which is fine. I get the walk around, getting used to the campus and everything like that. But they also had to everybody's parents were there as
Right.
well, and we were going out through the forms, and they were telling us which each line was. That somebody was reading it out to us as well. Like we're all handicapped apparently. Like it was just so. It was
Yeah.
so. It was so like.
It was almost
It was
insulting, right?
patronizing. Yeah. It was like.
Yeah.
You think we're children here, I guess. Well,
Right.
they not think they know you're children because they know that's what you were raised to be. Your thought process is you're expecting somebody else to tell you what to do all the time
Right.
because
So yeah. So let me ask you, what do you think? So you think it's personal responsibility is better or worse?
worse, 100% worse.
Yeah, like now, and I think so too. But it's mostly your generation, that's it's worse, and younger. They're like, they don't think they're responsible for anything.
Yeah.
Like it's always somebody else's fault. Like you know, um, anything. It doesn't matter if they were late for work. It was because traffic was bad. Like traffic's always bad. You leave earlier. If if your car broke down, well, my car broke down, and stuff happens. I'm not discounting that, but if have that extreme ownership and personal, well, you should have checked your car out. When that light went on, you should have checked it, or you should have changed the tires before they got so thin a pothole would pop them. Or made sure the pressure. That's real personal responsibility. Like you're not going to accept anything except somebody sitting there. You're sleeping in bed, and your mate goes crazy, gets up and stabs you while you're asleep. There's no way to anticipate that. But otherwise, like, why don't you have an alarm system? Why didn't you have all the doors locked? How come somebody's able to, like, there's one or the other, but really, yeah, I have to agree that nowadays it's like, it's everybody's fault, but the earliest, and it's always been that way. Every generation wants less and less responsibility, but wants more and more reward for less responsibility, which
Yeah.
boggles my mind. And the boomers were the first of that I saw. Like they were given everything. They grew up in the 50s and after the boom of the war. Now there wasn't as much to have as there is now, but their parents didn't want to have them to have it as rough as they did going through the Depression. So they gave them more stuff, and they didn't want them to have to work as hard. So they made it a little easier for them. And then they expected it to be that way all the time. And people were nicer and meaner. Crime was more rampant, but people who were the general person was just nicer to your face. They were more polite, more manners than now, because there are more repercussions. People get in. I'm growing up, fight at the drop of a hat, and nobody would go to jail. But now it's a major event. SWAT team gets called out if two guys are fighting in the park. No weapons. Yeah. Well, then it was like, they'll feel better about it later, and they'll have a beer. But now it's not like that at all. So.
Yeah.
And because of that, they really don't understand. I think that, look, it really is on you. Nobody owes you anything except respect as a human being. And that's it. And respect as a human being does not mean necessarily you can live for free somewhere. Somebody's going to feed and clothe you for free. Somebody's going to give you entertainment for free. Somebody's going to give you anything you want for free just because you exist, because you don't feel like being bothered to earn it or go out and get it yourself,
or to put any effort into
or put
anything.
any effort into it. It's gone from that extreme to where when I was coming up, nobody gave you anything unless they were your family, your friend, or thought that you could do something for them. And now it's going to, I truly believe they think, no, there needs to be a living, like a stipend, $2,000 a month. That's been going on for a couple of years just for living. $2,000 a month and a place to live. So if you don't want to have to do anything, you don't have to do anything. Well, most people, and there's a bell curve, are going to do nothing. And then they're going to demand more, because that $2,000 plus a place to live and free medical care, they're like, well, that's not enough. It's like, well, it's never enough. But at some point you have to be responsible for yourself, and not only that, they're going to, why do I have to wait in line to get my free stuff? That's what I'm waiting for now.
There'll be always the standard of what to gripe about will always rise.
Right?
We're living in the best age ever, and people are still bitching about this.
Right. So that's what I think. Where do you find that line to where, okay, as a society, and that's that definition, that I read earlier, that's a society where you draw the line and say, you're responsible for this, not anybody else,
Yeah.
That's a tough one. And it constantly changes. I've watched it change over the years. You didn't see it change over the years, but you kind of had the idea, that, man, this is wild. How can they expect to get that for nothing? But you can kind of see their logic. Like, yeah, I can't do anything about it. I can't earn a living, so somebody needs to help me out. And honestly, if you've truly tried everything and you're starving and you keep trying, I see nothing wrong with helping somebody. It's the thing when they make it a lifestyle, they'll never do anything else.
Yeah, it's never like welfare is a genuinely good idea. It's the I genuinely think majority of the people exploit it. They who use it don't need it.
You see
Majority
that
of the people.
yourself? You know that a lot of people are going to say we're the R word for thinking that.
I didn't say any certain race.
I know, but that, people think that
Well,
even
there's
though
more
it's
white people on welfare than any other in
right,
America
right,
anyway.
right,
And I agree with those too. I see trailer trash people
yeah,
sitting in there, not doing anything, smoking whatever, and I'm
right.
like, and I have to go in those neighborhoods with my job right now, and I'm watching them. They're all just sitting on their porch, looking at me doing a job, and they're just pondering life, not life, pondering whatever they're pondering, if they have anything going on in their brain at the moment,
Right,
just slack jawed or mouth breathing, and
right.
you're just
Yeah,
like,
it's, and a lot of them would be like, and they're going to say, well, my mother was this, their father ran away, and like I didn't have anything. It's not my fault. I'm like this. But to go back to what we said earlier, it may not be your fault that you ended up in that position. I don't know, but it's still your responsibility to get out of it, whatever it is.
right,
So it's not anybody else's
right.
responsibility to make your position better. That
Yeah,
that's how
you
I
might
look.
have genuine gripes, you might have genuine problems, but at the end of the day, nobody else. Somebody can give you $10,000 a month. If you don't have the discipline to know what to do with it, you're gonna piss it all away. It means nothing. It means
Right,
nothing.
right.
So it's not gonna get you any
And you're
better in
going to
life.
blame somebody else for not showing you what to do with that free money while you
Yeah,
don't have it. Like, man, that's
right.
all you. All
Yeah,
yeah.
and then there's I mean, you can go into a lot of very touchy subjects with personal responsibility. The I think the biggest one right now is victim blaming. That's a very hot topic.
Like you're like an example.
The most I'm not going to touch the most hot one because you're trying to be YouTube approval, and I genuinely think they will
Well,
like.
I don't know. Let's see.
Okay, so the biggest victim blaming one is the RP word. So
Oh, yeah. See, to me, um, yeah, man, that I never understood that because unless somebody says, put your hands on me, you don't put your hands on them, period. You know what I mean?
like I think everybody, well, not everybody, because you always have your outliers, but majority of people I would think have a common sense understanding that yes, like no matter what person is dressing, like you don't put your hands on anybody,
Yeah, that
no
to
matter
me
how
would
they're
be a
acting to you, no
no-brainer.
matter how they're flirting to you. Yes, but there's to a certain extent of we'll put it into a different analogy to put it into concept of say somebody's living in a certain area and it's a high crime rate or there's a high likelihood of bad things or robberies, burglaries in their house,
All right,
and they just never lock their door.
right,
In fact, they have their door wide open, and they
right.
have their nice TV blaring, and they have their nice stereo system blaring, and you see them walking in and outside of getting things delivered to their house all the time, but they just never lock their doors. Well, after how many burglaries do the first one's like, bro, that sucks. Like
Yeah,
things
somebody
happen.
shouldn't be burgling from your home, but that part of it's on you. That's like
Right.
one of a recent Canadian judge. This guy got beaten up and robbed, money stolen from him. The cops showed up, found the people because they went to the bar and drank with his money, arrested him, and the judge didn't convict the guy who robbed him because the guy was flashing his money around and say, you're in a bar known to be a bad bar and you're flashing your money around and you get beaten up in the parking lot, money, that's your fault. I mean, and like,
That would be huge if that was another situation.
right. And in
That would be
Canada too, where
huge.
it's almost like they grow victims there. Like they want the, but they blame
They
the
harvest
victim.
them, they
Clearly,
cultivate
yeah,
them.
it's like they're always on the victim side. But yeah, it's like clearly they didn't. Now I don't know if there were some other factors going on, political things going on there that I'm
Right.
unaware of which it may have been, one type of person beat up and mugged another type of person, so they didn't want to send that person to prison, which is possible because they figure, that's the only. But you don't know that. And that's what I'm saying. That to me, look, the guy with the throwing money around and flashing it in a dive bar, yeah, so you're responsible because you're basically begging some of the people. And let me see when I say yeah, but only to a small degree. You still don't mug people. It's still he still would have gone to prison if it would
I
have been
agree.
my yeah
Yes. Yeah, he
yeah.
was still
But
yes.
that guy was stupid for flashing the money. But he's still
There's
not
personal responsibility on both sides is
right.
what but that conversation, the other conversation with women
Right.
involved gets immediately shut down if you say there's personal responsibility on both
Oh yeah.
sides.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Immediately shut down.
Well,
You
and you
cannot
know
say
what?
that.
It should be because, and I'll tell you why. Because, like I said, I agree that with anything. Unless you have the permission or legal authority to put your hands on somebody, you better not. Because to me, if you do it to me, even though I'm old, it could end very badly for you, no matter who
Sure.
you are. If I don't want, you know,
There's never a situation where if something happens to somebody and they're physically harmed or physically,
yeah,
assaulted or
like I
anything,
said,
where I'm ever going to be like, well, you shouldn't have
to
been
me, that's a
there.
bright, shiny line. And the thing is, somebody saying, "Well, man, she might not be a prostitute, but she's wearing a uniform." I don't care. You know,
Right. That
it,
person still go to jail, but how many times
even with
is
a
somebody
prostitute, you get permission and money.
right?
Or
100%.
so if it's if it's the other thing, you still committed multiple felonies. So I don't care. To me, that's a bright shine. There's no excuse. I don't care what she's dressed like. I don't care if she's naked running down the street. You don't do it. You know.
That yes, you don't do it. But there's to a certain point, if she's running down naked in the street, who's going to tell her to stop doing that? Because there's more likely of certain things happening if you do that.
I would. Like,
Right.
stop doing that. You need a ride back house.
Well, if you do that, that's victim blaming. That's what I'm telling you.
If you need some help,
No. If
something's
you
wrong. Clearly, she's naked running down the street. I'd figure
no,
something's chasing her out of her house.
if you tell somebody, say, well, I'm going to try to keep it away from that specific
All right,
content
let's
to
stop
give
this one
you
because it makes. I'm
content.
going to tell you that it makes no sense to me. There's no way to me you can justify that. So I'll just say I don't. There's no argument to me you can justify that. But I'll say this, and it's even fat shaming. Here's a big one. And they're like, I have no control. I have a medical condition. That's why I'm 5'2", 300 pounds. Okay. And I'm like, you didn't get a medical condition until you were 5'2", 200 pounds. So no, it's not unless you have some gallbladder issues, some pituitary gland issues, some hormonal and other issues that aren't insulin related because of your overweight. And even then, it's not. It's all on you to change it once you're an adult and not be overweight anymore.
So that's an interesting one because I used to be hard on your side of it.
Yeah.
And now that I now relate addictions, a lot of addictions to like a drug because that's what it is.
The biggest drug to me is food. It's readily available and it changes your hormones and mental mood and physiological condition more often and just as completely as any other hardcore drug, but you have to eat, and that's the thing. You can't escape it. You have to eat. But the thing is, it's on you to know when to stop.
100%.
And what to eat.
It's the same way that I would hold a meth head accountable for his decisions, though. It's like you brought yourself into this situation,
right?
But at the same time, if you're trying to get yourself out of the situation, that's so hard to get out of that I understand why government help would need to be necessary in this, or some type of supplemental help.
And honestly, I'm as BoomerX, I'm okay with that. If you want to share.
Now, there's a certain situation where I don't think that's where it's like welfare. Do you need to be on welfare? You know what I mean? Or do you need psychiatric help? Because it's a drug? Like, do you need rehab? You really just need rehab because it's a drug issue essentially.
But
like you
have
a disease.
That would mean that people would, if you can't get arrested for being morbidly obese. That's you can't be arrested for being high on meth and out in the street. So you can be forced to rehab if you're arrested for meth use or dealing or possession. You can't be arrested for just being overweight.
That's a very interesting point of freedoms because I'm always pro as many freedoms as we can get. I'm always pro, but at the same time, you're like, to what point? Somebody's 500 pounds. Nobody's healthily 500 pounds. Nobody.
Right. Even if you're one of those strong men, you're 7'6" and 500 pounds of muscle. You still got medical issues,
Right. Like okay, if you're a strong man who happens, I don't even think, or Bjornsson or anybody's even
Yeah,
500 pounds.
they were like 420
They're
or
getting
something.
close, but they're not
Yeah, yeah.
500.
And they were
Like if you're
also 6'10",
500 pounds,
6'9", but
right?
they still
Like,
had medical issues. They had to
yeah,
watch
yeah.
their blood pressure and their joints,
Well, because they're,
and
they're
they
taking
were,
GH and everything
yeah,
else too.
and they were in
So,
great shape, but
it,
when you
yeah,
have that much mass, in Earth gravity, it's a problem.
right.
Even
Well,
if you have the frame and muscle to support it,
we're going away from probably most of these people aren't going to be athletes.
No,
And even
that's
if they're an athlete, they're not 500 pounds. So,
right.
so if you're 500 pounds, should we bring in enforcement of, jail or incarceration of some type? That's a possibility that I'm willing to think about
No,
genuinely
I
because
tell you what, though, I think that's preposterous to me. So you're willing to think about it because you're willing to, a society spreading it like a socialistic web across thing, how we're all related. I'm not willing to do that at all, but I'm also not willing. I'm also not willing to help those people. Like if you're like one of them we saw, this man was 950 pounds, right? He couldn't get out of bed. I'm like, that's an easy fix. You clearly don't need to eat. So, until you lose enough weight to get up and do something, there you're going to lay.
right.
And that's cruel, and that seems cruel. And I'm not saying they shouldn't get medical attention, but definitely not any food. I
Well,
wouldn't.
the biggest worry is dying from shock, so you'd have to give them,
Yeah,
some
shock
type
and
of something.
in water, fluids, and make sure they have enough
You know,
vitamins. They don't.
yeah,
But
nutrition
that person
deficit.
could not eat for a very long time, and they'd be fine.
Yeah, yeah, months.
But if we go to free medical care in the country, and I think eventually we will,
Yeah.
and if we do that, the first thing they're going to do is say you're obese, you need to lose weight. How are they going to enforce that? They're going to go up on your premiums because you're more of a danger and cost more than somebody else who's not.
No, I
Are
can't
they
go on
going to
premiums because it's free
are they going
healthcare.
to put you in fat rehab and make
That's
you
what I would.
you
That's what I
know
would do. I would put like I would do like a druggie. Like
I mean,
you need
that
to go to
could be
rehab.
so if you're not taking personal responsibility, if society becomes even more networked and closer, woven together, other people are going to take it. So you'll have no real freedoms. So you either take responsibility for yourself, or if we continue to go down the path that everybody's responsible for everybody else, then they're going to be telling you what to do.
And I think that's the biggest. I think that's what I was trying to touch on. Was one of my biggest things was concluding all of this was, and you said it was, the more everybody takes responsibility for other people, the less freedoms everybody actually has.
That's exactly right, and it can't really be any other way. You can't.
And that's why I was
It
going
won't work.
into. That's why I was going into. Oh, you're 500 pounds. We need to help you, and the only way to help you is you can't help yourself. So we need to incarcerate you. So that's less freedoms you have because we're taking care of you. Is really what I wanted to go down that line of thought.
Yeah, they won't call it incarceration. They'll call it
No, they'll call it something,
rehab,
but it'll be
involuntary rehab or something.
well, they don't call taking you to jail without any warrants or anything kidnapping, but it's kidnapping. So
Well, if they catch you in the commission of a crime, it's not. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, right. But
I'm
if
with
they
you.
have
It's not a
suspicion,
false arrest if they didn't if there's no reason to arrest you and they just decide to do it.
yeah, they hold you and they hold you for 24 hours because they can. Oh, that's kidnapping, but we're
But
not
they said it
talking.
was okay.
Yeah, right.
These guys said it was okay. That makes it less kidnapping. No, it's still kidnapping. It's just legal.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm
Right.
with you. But the personal responsibility thing, that's a touchy one. Like you said, ultimately, like you said, if you don't have it, you'll never have it. But you'll also never have success because you'll be constantly blaming, no reward, and you'll still suffer. That's the other thing. I found people who shirk personal responsibility suffer more than anybody else and they're constantly bewildered that they can never have anything, and they wonder why. And that to me, it's like that's a legit question for those people, and I can't understand why they can't understand it. Maybe you can. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, most likely reason is nurture, lack of nurture. They weren't raised properly. They weren't raised with
No
discipline.
examples. Nobody. I don't know. To me, it boggles my mind. But I was in a different era. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, you go back to that situation of when does responsibility happen for you? And it really is an individual case by case, but we can't treat it that way because everybody would be so out of we'd have to know your entire life story to know where you should be. We're not going to be doing this.
I would
So
say, societies have changed over the millennia, like the Jewish society, you're a man or a woman when you're 13. They do the bar mitzvah and they do I forgot the girl version. Uh,
quinceañeras,
yeah, in the case of
15.
the Mexican culture, they at 15, they're a woman, they can date, but they also have that responsibility. They're expected to do certain things around the household now. And all that. So those cultures had it. And it's like our culture, they kind of give you signposts, but they never really have except 18 and 21. That's the two biggies. 18, you're almost an adult. You're a 3/4 or 7/8 of an adult. And at 21, you're a full adult, even though you might be in university and they still don't let you do certain things because you're in university and they control you till you graduate. And, then you're 22, 23. And then,
Right.
but so that's a long time of being a child, basically. And then all of a sudden, everybody's looking at you,
Yeah.
but and you're expecting everybody else to still, you really don't know what personal responsibility is at that point if you've never really had it from the beginning.
Yeah, and you want to be mad at the 22-year-old who's getting out of college and arrogant because he thinks he knows things when really he doesn't know anything because he's been treated that way.
I had one your age group and I was trying to train him. He knew everything, would argue with me, and I'd been doing that job for 30 years and he knew nothing.
Right.
He knew just enough terminology to get himself in trouble, but he didn't even really know what he was talking about. He didn't even know what the words meant he said. And I tried to help until I finally just washed my hands of him and said, I'm done. And and I tried a couple of times later just to get it going, and he would immediately start, and then he'd blame me. Well, I didn't get any training. Like I tried numerous times, and you literally refused it or would argue and freely admit, I don't know what to do, but I'm not doing what you're telling me what to do. And I was clearly known as being the person that knows what to do. Like everybody.
Yeah, I'm training you.
Yeah,
they appointed me,
and he just refused to do it. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's like it's really hard to not feel resentment towards them about it because they definitely don't help themselves.
Oh, I did. And the thing is, I tried to be nice and say my door's open if you got any questions. He would deliberately avoid it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of pride there, a lot of ego clashing.
Yeah, and I just let him have it. Just man, it's all on you. I'm okay. And and if I would have been if it would have been 20 years earlier, like when I was coming up, I would have said, I need this completed by this date. And if he didn't, and I tell him this is how I want you to do it, and if he didn't come ask me questions or have it done by this date, he would have gotten written up. He wouldn't have had a job in 30 days. And now he lasted for years until he finally went somewhere else because he felt like he wasn't treated properly. And I tried to be as nice as I could while giving him every chance, and he just flat refused, But that's he had zero personal responsibility,
Right.
And there was none I was going to give him. Now, it might have been a personal issue with me, but at some point you have to go. It doesn't matter about personal issue. I need to find out what's going on. But I had one disciplinary thing early with him, and after that he resented me forever after that. But again, it's on him to get over it. I didn't treat him poorly after that, but I wouldn't allow him to disrespect me. And even then, I did allow certain things he'd say. I just let it slide. But he doesn't know I was so nice to him. I could have fired him many times over, and I didn't. And that's all on him. My hands are clean as far as moral responsibility with him.
Right.
It's all on him, and he would vehemently disagree. But I know that to be the case.
Yeah, and that's where it's like that the saying where ignorance is bliss isn't always so right because ignorance is bliss does not work in these situations.
No, he knew just enough to get himself in trouble. That's it. And like I said, supremely arrogant, and that's on him. And I tried over a few years. I tried numerous times and wouldn't have it. He just wouldn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And every angle, every way, every modem. How they have different ways you try to read. I tried all that. Didn't matter. Just letting time didn't matter. So, but that's you know, and that's what I'm saying. You will not be a success without accepting personal responsibility. And funnily enough, the more personal responsibility you take on, typically the more successful you are until you reach like the breaking point of stress and sleepless nights. But I promise you, like the big successful guys, they have extreme ownership. They do. When I say guys, I mean that in the generic, could be women too. But you see, they
Gotta be
they
inclusive.
yeah. Well, that's true though.
Yeah.
They try to do everything. They try to do too much, but they look at it as their responsibility.
hmm
Yeah.
Well, and if we're gonna go there with it, is that a lot of women take even more responsibility because they genuinely sometimes they do have to compensate with being a woman because people put on a certain.
Well, they think they do, but in
There's
some cases it might be, but you really don't. Just do your
yeah.
job.
Well,
Just do what you're supposed to do, and honestly, you'll be fine. If some guy messes with you, immediately don't tolerate it. In a way that's shouldn't be. Like if they're not treating you like another. But here's the thing: some dudes will treat you like another dude, and that'll offend you, and then that's
that's
because like I'm a
that's a
woman,
thing.
like yeah, that's where you get that. But that's a
That
whole other topic.
double standard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll talk about that double standard on another video. Yeah.
I wanted to get the one I wanted to press on was, and we never really got to it, so I'll just segue straight to it. Is the difference in life choices for each other because of knowing what life can become if we take certain choices and paths. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So personal responsibility in that regard is I know if I do these things, say marriage, have kids, buy a house, if I buy a house, I'm stuck with this house because I have to pay this mortgage. Or, career choices. Like if I decide to climb this ladder, I'm stuck in this job to climb this ladder. And I'm specializing now. So now I'm stuck in this immobile, I'm immobilizing myself. I'm less modular. I have less choices because I'm choosing this path. If I have a kid, I now have to take care of this kid. I have these
Yeah.
responsibilities. If I have a wife, I have to, provide for her and the children, and I have my career. I have these responsibilities. Now I have to have a house for all these things to provide for them. Like there's a lot of good that comes with that. There's a lot of bad that comes with that, but both of them are these are choices and there's certain responsibilities that come with those things. And I think a lot of more men my age aren't getting into those choices as soon as they were when they were your age.
Oh
Because
no. Yeah. Monetarily, well, society's different. Like I said, you're not an adult now until much later in life.
right,
Like, you know,
and that definitely plays a part into it.
and that's good and bad. I think it makes it easier on y'all, honestly, and it's less stressful.
hmm
I think personally, it can be better in many ways, but it's also worse. It gives you a false sense of, hey, ain't my problem, kind of deal, and it carries over too late because once you're used to not taking responsibility, it's easy to never have it, you know.
Yeah,
But you're looking at it as a responsible person. Like I know if I make these choices and do these things, that I'm responsible. But a lot of people don't. They're like, well, I made that choice, but it ain't my problem, and that's
yeah,
where you run into trouble,
yeah.
But that's
I'm
what
going
anybody.
into the responsible ones and why they're not diving into that choice so
Yeah, but
early
that's
as they used to be.
ironically, that's a responsible decision to not to
Yeah,
not take on those responsibilities because you
it's
don't want
certain.
it, and you're not gonna you
Right.
you're gonna step up because you have to, and you don't want to. You know, it's
True.
kind of like, and I'm minimizing here, but it's like I won't own a dog because I know I'll be responsible, and you can't just leave anytime you want.
Right.
Leave the dog at home, or you have to kennel it, or you have to, and the dog will be miserable. They want to be around you. I won't own a dog, because I know I'm going to be that responsible person, and I'm just not going to have it.
hmm
So there's that. But next episode, we're going to talk about metaverse and what do you think it's going to be like, and if it's going to take off or crash or what. But thanks, and we'll catch up in the next podcast. This was Personal Responsibility Podcast number 1 with BoomerX and MillennialZ.
The dumbest